Here's our entire interview with singer-songwriter Jeri Lynne. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book. Jeri Lynne has been in the industry since she was 10 years old, doing jingles for the famous radio station KHJ and many other stations after that. She kept at it, working with bands like our subject today, the Righteous Brothers, Michael McDonald, Jeff Bridges, B.J. Thomas, Crystal Gale, Tony Basil. She was Peter Tork of the Monkees' manager, and she's also performed with David Foster, Warren Wiebe, the Judds, and many more. Okay, I'm going to start with the radio question.
Okay.
Sam Riddle, Robert W. Morgan. There's a great respect that I think a lot of announcers have when they know any singer has done any kind of jingle work or any kind of like voicing on the radio.
Right.
Let's start there. Before we start about you singing, how did you get that gig at the age of 10?
Well, let's see. It was, they had, at Christmas time, they had the KHJ Christmas Wish. So you would send in a postcard with whatever your Christmas wish desire was. Well, our wish was for an electric can opener for our mom because she had the old crank style and she broke it and all hell broke loose. So we wrote in and asked for an electric can opener and we got selected. So my dad drove us to Hollywood to the studio, to KHJ studio, which, that was a big deal in LA. That was the big one. And there they were, Sam Riddle, Robert W. Morgan. And we were asked what our wish was. And then they asked us to tell it on the air. And my sister was very shy, painfully shy. And she was afraid to speak, and me being the ham I was, I just said, "We're here. We want our Christmas wishes for electric can opener for our mom because hers is broke."
Man, you revert right back to that pretty good.
Well, I do children's voices for a living, but so we and everybody started laughing, and I couldn't figure out what was so funny, but. When we were given our gift and sent on our way and went home, we got a call back saying they wanted me to do some station IDs. I was like, what? What's that? And so that's how it started. And then from there, I got hired to do some commercial work, kids' voice commercial work. And I'm in my 60s now, and I'm still doing children's voices.
Did you get into that easily? Were you able to, as a child, and I'm always curious when people get thrust into something, some people kick and scream things in life, whether they're good and bad, they just fight it all the time. But You said you were a ham. Did you just walk in and?
I was just like on stage all the time. Apparently I was pretty gregarious kid, according to my mom. And, or she, as she liked to say, you're a show off. Oh, stop showing off. But, I lived in my head. I had all these little voices, so I would imitate everything I heard. And apparently it worked for me later in life. So I ended up getting work doing that. And then I did. So at that age, I was doing, my own natural voice for commercials and stuff. And then later on, I came back to that same radio station because then when we had the rock stations, KMET, KLOS, KROQ, Rodney Bingham and all those guys, who I'm talking about, they hired me to do station IDs, and we would take whatever pop songs were, sorry, my thing's falling out here. We would take whatever pop songs were popular at the time and insert the call letters of the station. So it might be a Pretenders song. It might be, Joan Jett or something, but whatever it was. So we would do a piece of the song and insert the call letters in. So that's why I went from children's voices to rock voices, and then I just got into TV jingle work, and commercials and station IDs. And then I did sound alikes for a lot of TV shows, because back then, it was still licensing was still a problem back then, and paying royalties a lot of money. So they would do the easier route and have us do sound-alikes. So one day I'd be Chrissy Hind, and the next day I'd be Aretha. So I never knew who I was going to be until I got the call.
Did your parents get it? Did your parents, I mean, that was an early age of you going in there and you're earning money. Did they get it?
Not at first. Not at first. They did when they saw the paychecks. Right. But then it was kind of a, back and forth battle. Sometimes they, especially when I was in school, and then I would have to take off school to do something, and then so sometimes they were okay with it. Sometimes they were not, because it was a giant pain to stop the world and drive Jeri Lynne to Hollywood. But it's what we did,
Did they ever tell you to get a real job at that? Was there ever a point where they said, okay, this can only go so far? I'm just curious.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. And my mom remarried a couple times, and my father was an artist. He got it. But my stepfather, he was total business guy and didn't get it. And so he was like, couldn't understand. And, and he wanted me to get a real job. In fact, he wanted me to come work for his company selling cars. I lasted 2 days.
I would have thought you would be good at that too, though. I don't know.
Well, I said, I can sing the jingle for your car commercial, but no, I'm not good behind the desk. I will be horrible.
You're in a dentist's office, doctor's office, whatever, and you're beside someone, and the person turns around and said, "Oh, so not what are you in for?" Because you don't ask that, but
right.
What do you do? How do you answer? Because you do a lot. How do you answer that? Because if you say too much, who have you worked with? Sometimes the energy changes in the room. But okay, I'm in the doctor's office and I'm asking you, right. Hey, so like, what do you do? What do you say?
Well, I generally say that I'm in the music business. All aspects from the business to the performance level just depends on, it just depends on the job.
But the next question. Now, next question is, sorry to interrupt you, but the next question is, have you done anything I'd recognize? And you've worked with so many people, so that when that question comes up, what do you say?
Right. Well, here's a fun one. My dentist, who I've been going to for many years, knows that I used to work with the Righteous Brothers. He says to the girl who asked me that question, the tech, she used to work with the Righteous Brothers. And so here I've got this apparatus hanging out of my mouth. And he goes, go ahead, sing something. I'm like, you smart ass. But, and then one time, one of our songs came on, in the in-house music, and I'm sitting there humming because I was, on funny gas, They're
probably going, you sound better up there. That person doesn't have funny gas. Yeah.
Are you sure you were really with them? I'm not convinced.
Oh, I've got to ask you about To a Child. That is just a beautiful, beautiful song. I was listening to some of your stuff. I mean, it melted me.
That is a Laura Nyro song. Laura Nyro was probably my first major influence musically as a writer, as a singer, as a pianist. Her and Joni Mitchell, of course.
Well, Laura was one of those girls who, because so many people recorded. Do you know Joel Diamond, by the way?
No.
Joel Diamond worked with her. He was a music executive guy, and I remember I contacted him because he'd worked with Laura. Mm-hmm. And we've lost her now. And a long time ago, and I went, I asked him, I says, okay, Joel, was she a little peculiar? I'm just I says, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but she just seemed a little eccentric to me. He said she was all those things and more, but it's interesting that you would, I'm glad and I'm not surprised, I guess you connected with her.
Yeah, on probably on the deepest level, because when I was a teenager in high school, I was kind of the outcast. I was the hippie. I had the I had jet black straight hair down to my knees. I was very quiet, very shy. And so I connected with her like that because her music, really spoke about that dynamic. And I was, I actually had started on guitar, but then I had moved I played piano most of my life as a little kid, but when I got into her music, I literally just absorbed it all. I sat with every album and I learned everything by ear because there wasn't music available at the time until later, until, a couple albums later. But yeah, I really identified with her and her stories and the loneliness because I felt alienated. People in high school, I went to a kind of I will say uppity, higher income bracket high school. And people would look at me and go like, like if I walked into school with something fabulous like this on, they'd look at me like I was a freak. And I often did, by the way. I broke all the rules. And so that's why I identified with Laura's music so deeply.
And it's interesting with her with like Three Dog Night and Fifth Dimension, so many people recording her stuff where on some level, unless you were really plugged in, unless you were in on singer-songwriters and really had a thirst for it, because I call sometimes music fans fair weather music fans. I was outside of an Elton John concert once, and I'm holding the little microphone, the little radio announcer guy, waiting for people to come out. Elton John's my favorite artist of all time. I said, you couldn't get me tickets? So I'm representing the radio station, and people, I said, whoa, what are your favorite Elton John songs? And they're all mentioning basically the top 5. No one's saying Tiny Dancer. They're all saying Daniel, Goodbye Old Brick Road, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, or whatever. Like the cherry picking the songs that no matter if you're where you live on that.
Right.
But with Laura, I found with her, and even Joni sometimes, being a Canadian, I even found that where unless I found a serious music fan, they could go deep. The real music fans knew about Laura Nyro. They certainly did in Canada with Joni Mitchell. But there's always that side of music fans who, and even with the Righteous Brothers, you come up to some people and they'll maybe name you 3 songs, unless they're from that generation and unless they're musicologists. See, to me, you strike me as someone who was always a little deeper with the music than I think a lot of people were.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because it was my solace. It was my world that I went to. It's my one place where I could go, be myself. Didn't need anybody else. It was it was always there for me.
Well, it's interesting. I'm doing a Joni thing because I'm doing the history of Canadian music on our Canadian channel. And there's always these artists that no matter who you talk to, they'll have, blah, 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 they'll just go nuts on Joni.
I was playing guitar then when I discovered Joni Mitchell. And I was pretty proficient at it. But what fascinated me were her open tunings. So and once again, we didn't have access to that information. So I had to rely on my ears. So I would tune down to the tunings that I felt they were. And when I discovered that, it was Cold Blue Steel and that Joni Mitchell time, with the guitar work. But I went from Laura Nyro to that, and I was losing my mind. I thought this is the most incredible world ever between those two artists. So I think that probably, of course, everybody's first thought is Woodstock and the early stuff. But mine was that when she got into the transition from the guitar to the piano stuff. And then, when we got into up to Blue, probably that album Blue, that was it for me, because that was the first song I learned on that album on piano. And, it's like when I can't sleep, I have a piano in my bedroom, by the way, because I have a piano in every room in the house, But I recently bought a new home out here in the desert, and I moved a piano into my bedroom because I write. I wake up in the middle of the night and I write. Or if I can't sleep, I will get up and play some Joni Mitchell or some Laura Nyro or some Elton John, whatever I'm moved to play. And
as a piano player, do you like people like Bruce Hornsby? Just curious.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. He's a genius, absolute genius.
Last time I talked to him, he was still, but his twins were babies then. They're out of university now. He said he was practicing. I doubt if he does it now, but I don't know. It's Bruce Hornsby. He was practicing 10 hours a day. I can't imagine.
I would believe that. I mean, when I hear how intricate his work is, that's not easily done.
The album, Just For You, All I Can Do, tight, gorgeous, production. Who's the drummer?
The drummer, let me see. The drummer on that was Steve DeStanislav. We call him Stevie D. He's with David Crosby, and he is amazing. When I first met him, he was just past his teen years, and he was working for Paul Anka. That was his first big job, and I think we were doing, casuals at the time, weddings and private parties and stuff. And he called me on the phone and said, Miss Lynne, I'd really like to work with you. And I'm going, anybody who calls me Miss Lynne, you have a job. And you can drop that, by the way. But he came in and he just nailed everything, because we did the usual shtick you got to do, for those kind of events. But when we did my original projects, he was amazing. He just walked in and nailed stuff. And he's playing with some pretty heavy people these days. But yeah, I was so impressed for his age at the time that he was so proficient and just so musical, just an amazing talent.
If your version of I Just Called to Say I Love You, slowed down, that's as delicious can be.
Oh, thank you. Well, Herbie Hancock did an amazing version in that style. But anyway, I kind of took that version and just, took it out a little bit more and just did it pretty free form. I just wanted it to just breathe.
With the Righteous Brothers, how does, like, we're going to talk about a few gigs here, but how does that happen? I mean, obviously you got to have the talent. I always say this. My son edits my videos. He hates hearing me say this over and over again, but you got to do the work to get in the room. So you deserve to be there, and that's great. But how did you get that one?
Well, the way I got that job was actually pretty cool. They owned a nightclub called The Hop. It was actually originally called Music City, I believe, down in the Orange County area, Southern California. And there was a 50s rock and roll show that they had there called Rock Around the Clock. And so, and it was a cast, and it was really, Bill Medley put together an amazing rock and roll show of all these classic rock tunes, and from 50s and 60s. And but before I actually got into that band, I was working with a 14-piece horn band called Bim Bam. And Bim Bam was made up of members of Redbone. Remember the band Redbone? Come and Get Your Love. Butch Valera and Tony Bellamy were the two male leads, and myself. And we went through a few girl singers. We had Dee Dee Gray, and then we had Diane Newberry and Lisa Burns. But I was the longest lasting member because I was not going to give that gig to anybody. That was my gig. And because I got to go in there and sing Tina Turner and Aretha and just all because I had the big loud chops. 5'3", very small, 105 pounds, but I sounded like a freight train coming at you. So that's how I got that job. And when the Righteous Brothers used to come see because we performed in their club, it was called Medleys before it became The Hop. And they used to come watch our show, and they'd get up and sing a couple of their tunes with us. But then they hired me after seeing me and hearing me sing with that band. But when they said, yeah, but we really need a piano player. So it's between you and another girl. And I said, I play piano because I had my own rock band at the time, So I had to. And the funny thing is, I went out and did a couple gigs with them as a singer, just some local dates. But then I had to come back and audition on piano because our manager at the time said, yeah, well, I don't know if she's good enough to play piano, though, So, so I went, okay, well, you already know I can sing, so I will bring my piano in and I will audition for you. And, I got the job, and then the rest is history. Then I was with them for 14 years.
I love the audition stories. Is there a sense, I mean, obviously the history, that's one of the biggest bands, duos of all time, that were you intimidated, but you were seasoned at the time? So how did it feel?
I wasn't really intimidated, only because, when we were working in their nightclub, we saw them all the time. And they were just like Joe everybody, they were hanging out and sitting with the band and drinking beers and getting up and sitting in with us and singing just old time rock and roll songs, not even their songs, just having fun. And they were always so easy to be around. They were real comfortable. They were comfortable with us. We were comfortable with them. And so, and I'm kind of like, there's very few people I'm like really starstruck by. I mean, I'm usually pretty comfortable around people, artists, but, and them, I felt like they were family because we all had, we'd worked together doing all kinds of stuff. So when I took that next step to go join the band and go on tour with them all those years, it stayed pretty much that way. We were like a family, me and it was, at first we had two other girls who sang background, and I was on piano singing background. And then they scaled the band down, but they kept me, thank you, God, because I played piano. And because Bill had a big hit with The Time of My Life from the Dirty Dancing movie. So clearly one of the other guys wasn't going to cover that. So, so they kept me for that reason as well. So I got to stay there.
What did you learn about Bobby and Bill coming out of that? Was there a thing that you came out with, and may he rest in peace, Bobby? By the way, you weren't on tour. Were you on tour with them when Bobby passed?
No, I had left the year before. I had retired. I got to that point where I just was done, and I was also going through a transition, in my marriage, and so and my son was little. He was our son, I should say. He was 3 at the time, and I thought, this isn't going to work. So I made the decision to say goodnight, thank you and good night, and I came home to raise my son. And I left LA and came to the desert, out in Palm Springs desert, because I wanted to go somewhere peaceful that was kind of small town-ish, where I could really, give him my full attention and the best possible, scenario for small towns better in that sense to me, because LA, you just get lost in the shuffle in big cities. I had been there a long time, 14 years with some breaks in between here and there. And some of it just local, some of it, the major traveling. But yeah, when you've reached that point, and I love the guys. They're, like I said, they were like two dads or 2 older brothers, and the guys in the band, they always looked out for me. We really were a family, and but with the way things were at home, it just didn't feel right. I knew I needed to come home, and I just knew I was done. And I've in between that tour, I was also doing other tours as well. I was with Stacy Q at the time, and she was really popular at that time. She had all the big hits, and so So I was juggling tours, working in town, doing sessions. Because one thing about session work is if you're gone too long, they forget you. So I would be on the road and say, I'm going to be home these dates. If you need me, and I was, pretty relentless about it because I'd seen how it worked, where people just forget you and then you never get called again. So I was like on the road scheduling my one and only 3-week opening. I packed it full of sessions so that they would, keep calling me, So.
Did your parents, are they still around? Did they get to see your success?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, my father is gone, but my mom is with us. However, she's, in the throes of dementia. And so, but she's a good sport. I mean, she loves music. And I turn on in her room, how we have all the music channels, or she will get a hold of the remote. And, she likes to watch cop shows. Don't ask me why, but she loves those shows. But she will get off course, just start clicking and clicking. And then I will hear blasting out of the back of the house. I'll hear, some Sinatra or some, or one day Pat Benatar came blaring out of my mom's room and she's laying on her bed going, just like totally loving it. And I'm cracking up because I'm like, can you hear that? Okay. Because it's like,
yeah.
But my mom was, she was a supporter. She always came to my shows.
Like when you looked at Righteous Brothers, Unchained Melody, as of a couple of weeks ago when we were going to talk, was at 310 million streams. You've Lost That Love and Feeling was at 94. But were there songs when you went in there, because this is such a large, you can't, even if you live under a rock, you've heard You've Lost That Love and Unchained Melody, You've Lost it. There's no way through osmosis, but more than that, you've heard it firsthand. Were there certain songs from their repertoire that when you played it, you kind of were in the moment and going, this is it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the ones that were button pushers for me were the ones that weren't the biggest hits. They had a song called Just Once in My Life. It's a Barry Mann and Cynthia Wilde song that, if you're a fan, you of course know this song, but not everybody. It's not one of those radio ready songs. It's more of the album filler type song. Even though it was a huge song, but yeah, I found myself. I find myself attracted to those songs because, the ones you hear over and over and over and over. You can, I can do them in my sleep with my eyes closed and one hand behind my back. But those other songs are absolute works of art as well, and that's where I tend to drift. I want to hear the stories. I like the storytellers. I like the artists that are the storytellers. I like the songs that tell a story. That's why we're so enamored with, Laura Nyro and Joni Mitchell and Elton John and Billy Joel, because they tell these great stories about guys in the community or the bar or this woman down on her luck or it's like, that's the meat of it for me. I want to hear the story. And that's why I became a songwriter, because that spoke to me more than anything.
Yeah. I like the Billy Joel. I've always liked because he has we used to have this saying in radio commercials, and I used to try to teach our writers this. I'm going, don't say I'm a police officer. Say I'm on the force. Make their brain work a little bit. They just unconsciously they're going to get, but don't feed it all. Like, Billy Joel says he can't drive with a broken back, but at least he can polish the fenders, stuff like that. You're visualizing, and Bernie Taupin with his words was very much, he'd make me work a little bit without explaining it all to me. And that's a good writer.
Yeah. Right.
By the way, did you guys do Rock and Roll Heaven, the Alan O'Day song, which was a comeback for them? You guys did that, right? Yeah, we did. We did. In fact, there were 2 different versions of it, though, so it got tricky now and then because the original version,
how do I say this? Later on, you know, the more artists that we lost, in other words, they would there would be additional lyrics to support that artist that we just lost. So sometimes, now it got tricky once in a while. We were out on the road, and you know, Janice gave us Jimmy. Oh no, Jimmy gave us a piece of a heart. Otis Dock of the Bay. So, but they started changing the artists and the lyric lines, and we're all going, okay. So at a certain point, I just suggested, how about let's just leave the singer, because, you know, we sang a lot of background parts during these songs. I said, how about, since you're going to change the artist names and their tagline for their songs, how about we just wait to the chorus? Because at least we know that's going to be the same all the time, instead of us trying to figure out which, because, you know, they would screw lyrics up too, and then consequently so would we. So
who was the biggest surprise where you have an image of someone, but when you meet them, and I get that all the time interviewing people, I go, oh my God, I never thought that you were into this. And my God, we talked for, was there one of those?
You know, several. Whoopi Goldberg was one. When she was filming Sister Act in Reno, we were playing there at Harrah's. And she came to our show a couple nights in a row because they were in town filming. And she was so, what's the word I'm looking for? She was so open. You just felt like you knew her. You know what I mean? She was just so down home and just so from the heart and funny and just open. I mean, there was no like star vibe, you know, or unapproachable vibe. She was just so totally, I just keep coming back to the word open. She was so great. She sat with me and talked for about an hour after we all sat together with the Righteous Brothers, because her and I were studying with the same vocal coach in LA. I was studying with Seth Riggs. She was studying with Seth's wife. You know, because she had to sing in that movie and then the 3-girl sequence. So she was saying, "Girl, give me some secrets. Give me some." I said, "I'm going to tell you the same thing that they're telling you." She goes, "Yeah, but you're here now." So that was kind of fun that we shared some of that. But I kept in touch with her, and I mean, she just. And when you look at all the great stuff she's done, she is still that person. You know what I mean? She's just even. And another person who surprised me was Kenny Rogers. Now I never worked with Kenny, but when I left the Righteous Brothers, they did a lot of stuff with him before and after I came along, actually. And so I went to a couple of the shows, and he was just like your brother, like your dad. I mean, he was like the coolest guy ever to talk to. Very, very cool, very approachable. And, you know, when I think of names like Kenny Rogers, you know, you're thinking big, you know, epic. And it's just like, just like you and me talking. It's pretty amazing.
But then a couple weeks ago, you talked. So,
yeah.
So you guys knew each other, or?
Well, we had worked together. Right after I left the Righteous Brothers and I moved to the desert, I became a vocal music director for a church down in Southern California called the Crystal Cathedral. It was Dr. Schuler, Robert Schuler. And so I was a vocal music director where I whoever the guest artist was that week, and, you know, a lot of famous artists came through for the services. So my job was to contract the right singers for the right sound. So if I had, for example, if I had Crystal Gale or BJ Thomas, I would look for either the gospel singer, background singers, or country singers, or so whoever it was. David Foster was the first, and he had a great singer, if you're familiar with him, Warren Wiebe, the late Warren Wiebe. And I had already discovered Warren like a couple of years before that and hired him to sing on some of my duets, a couple of my songs. But David brought him to the Crystal Cathedral, because that was his show pony. And so we had the orchestra, David Foster, we had Warren Weeby, and I had every extraordinary singer I could round up, to back all these people up. So that's where I met them, and we did that for a couple of years, I think, and then then everybody went all their separate ways, and I've also done some writing, some co-writing on some music for him. But recently, I work at and I won't say where because but I've been working the country clubs here as a solo pianist for many years because A, it's really good pay, and B, it's a beautiful, upscale, gorgeous landscape atmosphere. And the one I'm at right now, I get to play a 9-foot Bosendorfer. And so I'm just in my own little world in there. I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, I love this piano. Oh my God, I love my job. Oh my God, in walks David Foster one night. And I'm like, and he's sitting in the back with his family, and my manager came up and said, you have a request for the prayer. And I said, okay, because he knew that I played it, right? Because, they get used to hearing my songs every night. I said, you had a request for the prayer. And I said, okay. And I didn't realize at the time he was actually the one requesting it because he thought David Foster should hear me play the prayer. I'm thinking, I'm probably not going to be anywhere near his version, but sure, I'll humor you. But so I played it, and they were the only table in the room. They were in the far corner, and it got very quiet. But at the time I couldn't see who they were. I just saw this party of about 6 or 8 people in the corner, and nobody told me who it was. So, so I'm playing and I get done, and then I hear this like kind of sigh, and then I hear, and I was like, God, no one here ever claps because they're eating dinner and drinking. And I look up, and this gentleman comes walking toward me, and it's David Foster. And I'm like, oh my God. And he said, that was beautiful. And he just came up to the piano and started talking to me. So then he's like, pretty soon he's like leaning on the piano or chit-chatting. And I said, well, you and I actually go back a ways. And I started talking about the cathedral and about Warren. And I just co-wrote something of yours last year with so-and-so. And he goes, wow, small world. So then he was in like 3 nights in a row. And the second night he came in, or was it the second or third night? He was standing at the bar 5 feet from me, ordering a bottle of wine. And I said, and I was playing the prayer at the time. And I look over and I go, oh, fine. I said, you would have to be standing here while I'm playing your song. Because he had said to me the night before, I want to come and play with you sometime. So I scooted over and I said, come here. So we sat down and we started playing together. Only we were in 2 different keys, which is kind of funny because, of course, he's got all these amazing singers that he does these shows with, and they all have different keys they sing it in. So he's been playing it in another key for like years now, and I'm playing it in the original. And he goes, "What key are you?" And I go, "I'm in the original key." And he goes, "What key am I in?" I said, "You're in E flat." And he goes, "Oh, sorry." But it was so cool. It was like one of those pinch me moments, So now when I see them, it's like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you."
He's just so comfortable in his skin.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, when you meet him, there's this air about him, and it's not arrogance. So, I don't want to give that impression at all. There's just this, I don't know how to phrase it. The word that comes to mind is stoic. There's this stoic vibe about him, He's just kind of like, he exudes like royalty. I mean, but he's approachable too. I mean, I used to be scared to death of him just because he was David Foster, but when I was doing the cathedral with him, but when I talk to him now, it's like, oh yeah, and we have like a lot of mutual friends and it's very comfortable, so and the fact that he's, he steps up and speaks to me every time he's there, or most of the time. And I'd see his family sitting there, and he's got all these beautiful, gorgeous daughters. They're just drop dead gorgeous. And his wife is beautiful and she's talented. And, it's like, oh my goodness, pinch me, but yeah, I mean, he's a really, really great person, really nice human being.
Peter Tork. So
Peter Tork.
Geez. When I read that, I'm going, you managed Peter Tork?
I managed Peter Tork. I hate to admit how many years, so I won't. I have a business. I also have a business. It's a booking agency where I book acts and independents. And Peter was doing a solo act. He had a band called Shoe Suede Blues. And my partner at the time was his guitar player, and they had, and Peter was really adamant about what he wanted to do. He did not want to go out and do Monkees music. He wanted to. He loved the blues. He wanted to have a blues band, and he wanted to go out and play the blues. He did not want to go out and play Daydream Believer or Last Train to Clarksville. But what he did do was take some of those songs and rework them. So he would do Last Train to Clarksville as a slow blues shuffle, and it was pretty cool. But he was having a hard time getting booked because the agents out there were insisting that he had to do some monkey songs. And he said, "No, I'm not doing it." So then he wouldn't work for them. And they were out there on the road, and my partner called me and said, "Would you be interested in booking him? Because he's just so tough and difficult in what he wants to do, and the agents don't want to touch him." And I said, "Sure."
How'd you work with that then? How'd you make that work?
Well, what we ended up doing was, because they were trying to push him on big venues, which he was not a big venue act. He was like a CBGB guy, little small, well-known clubs, but he didn't want the big thing with the triple and quadruple billing acts, a bunch of oldies acts. He did not want to do that. He wanted to play what he wanted to play. So I just got out my roster of clubs, and I went down the Eastern Seaboard and the California coast and wherever I could find, gigs like that for him. And I booked them, and in between all the other stuff I was doing, so, but Peter was an interesting guy. First of all, he's probably one of the most intelligent men I've ever met in my life. Just a brainiac to the 100th power. Eccentric, hard to deal with sometimes, but because he knew where his strengths were and his limits were, and he constantly pushed. He read every day. He listened every day. He had a pipe going. And classical music. He could tell you every piece, every composer, every movement, he just was a walking encyclopedia. But he and I connected on some level. I don't know, quirky maybe, but I was a fan, but I've never gone that way with people. When I meet people, I'm not like, "I'm one of your biggest fans." I just try to give them their space and let them be who they are. And if they want to go into that, I'm happy to go, "Yeah, that album, oh man." But you gotta give them breathing room too. And I never did that with Peter. I never went anywhere with that. I just said, "Whatever you need, you let me know." And
you have the secret there. You let them come up with
That was it. I said, "You just tell me what you need, and I'll concentrate on that."
Tommy Melm. I found Tommy to be one of the coolest guys I've ever interviewed. I just loved talking to him. I loved his brain.
I love that interview you did with him because he is a sweetheart, and his music is so gorgeous. I've been on 2 projects with him now. The first one was so great, and then the follow-up album too, just beautiful. But yeah, I got to sing. I actually co-wrote a song with him for the first album called "You Belong with Me," but there was a typo on it, so it says "You Belong to Me" on the cover, unfortunately. And the great Cliff Magnus from Planet 3, you're familiar with Cliff? He sang the lead on it, so that was a double cool thing. Tommy and Cliff, and yeah, he's a great talent, and all those great musicians on those albums.
Yeah,
I love that he did.
Well,
that.
Speaking of Warren, we were talking about Warren. He's a huge fan of his, of course.
Yes, yeah.
The Todd Rundgren project. Tell me about that.
Okay, that's my other nemesis. So there's Laura Nero, there's Joni Mitchell, and there's Todd Rundgren. I've been a Todd fan, a Todd head since day one, Utopian and the whole 9 yards. But as a writer, I love his work. I've always loved his work. But he's got a particular style that he plays, uses a lot of polychords, got different, where you would expect an E flat, he's got a B flat with a, so, a lot of polychord work, double chords going on. And so I decided to write, and this is so weird, like my last house before I moved to where I am now, I wake up and write a lot. This stuff comes to me while I'm sleeping. So this Todd, I could hear Todd singing this song that I wrote. Wishful thinking. But I ended up doing a whole series. There's 6 songs. And so they're my originals, but they're written in the style of Todd. I used his framework that he tends to use, and voicings, and the background vocals, the whole 9 yards. So, and we got some great players on that. A lot of the guys that play for our buddy John Zeka. Joel Taylor's on drums on that. John Pena is on bass. And Troy Dexter, who is a great guitarist, that's with Wilson Phillips. And I played keyboards. And we have a bunch of really great singers. And so I'm looking forward to actually personally delivering this to Todd, because I'm going to go see him.
What an amazing lady, huh? And what a career, and what a sweetheart she is. What a talent. What a voice. Remember, if you want to support the channel, the 2Ps, Patreon and PayPal, you can make a PayPal donation right now, or you can get early access to our videos via Patreon. Like our videos, subscribe to our channel, share them, and comment on them as well. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book. Take care of yourself.